My wife said stability felt restrictive and she needed space to explore bigger opportunities. I didn't argue. I secured my business interests, transferred my savings legally, and restructured our financial agreements. She reached out when opportunity came without predictable income or shared protection. I love you, but I feel like I'm suffocating. She said it on a Tuesday, not during a fight, not after a bad week. She said it over dinner, with a glass of Merlot in her hand, calm as someone announcing a weather forecast. I looked up from my plate. She didn't look away, and something in her expression told me she had rehearsed this moment more than once. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she continued, setting the glass down like she was settling in for a long presentation. About us, about my life, about what I actually want. I didn't say anything. I've learned, over years of building a business from nothing, that the most dangerous thing you can do in a high-stakes conversation is speak before you understand exactly what's being said. So I waited. I feel like our life has become predictable, she said. Like we're just going through motions. You work. I manage things here. We eat dinner. We sleep. We repeat. She paused. And I don't want that anymore. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. I'm 38 years old. I've been married to Claire for 9 years. We don't have children. That was a mutual decision we revisited every couple of years, always landing in the same place. I own a mid-sized logistics consulting firm. We have a nice house in a suburb outside of Portland. By most measures, we had built exactly the kind of life that takes real effort to construct. What are you saying, Claire? I finally asked it. Not with anger, not with panic, just the flat, direct question of a man who needed the full sentence before he could respond to it. She took a breath. I've been offered a partnership opportunity, she said. A real one. With Derek's sister and her firm in Austin. They're expanding into wellness consulting, and they want someone with my background in nutritional therapy and client management. That sounds like good news, I said carefully. It is, she agreed. But it requires me to be there. Physically. Full-time. At least for the first year while they're building the client base. Austin. Yes. I let that sit for a moment. And you'd want us to do long distance for a year. She looked at her plate. I'd want us to redefine things. Redefine things. Those two words landed like a brick on a glass table. Careful enough to sound reasonable. Heavy enough to crack everything underneath. I put my fork down. Redefine things how exactly? She met my eyes again. I think we've grown in different directions, she said. I think stability, real stability, the kind you've built, it's wonderful. It's safe. But for me, right now, it feels restrictive. Restrictive. Yes. My stability is restrictive. I don't mean it like an insult, she said quickly. I mean that I need room to explore, to grow, to take risks that our current structure doesn't really allow for. Our current structure, I repeated slowly. Our marriage. She didn't flinch. Our arrangement. Yes. I want you to understand something. I did not fall apart at that table. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not beg her to reconsider, or list everything I had done, or remind her of the years and the sacrifices and the mornings I woke up at 5 a.m. so that our life could be exactly what she always said she wanted. I picked my fork back up. I finished my dinner. And when she asked me what I was thinking, I said, I need some time to process this. Because I did, but not in the way she expected. That night, after Claire had gone to sleep, I sat in my home office with the door closed and a legal pad in front of me. I've always been better with a pen and paper when the stakes are high. Something about the physical act of writing keeps me honest with myself. I wrote 2 columns. On the left, what I could lose. On the right, what I could protect. The left column was long. 9 years of shared financial history. A house that was in both our names. A business that had used our joint tax returns for initial financing. 3 investment accounts we had built together. A savings portfolio that I had grown almost entirely through my own income, but which technically had her name attached to it, because we had set it up that way when we were 29 and naive and thought joint everything was the ultimate expression of commitment. On the right side of the page, I wrote one word. Time. I had time. She hadn't filed anything. She hadn't made any formal move. She had simply told me she wanted to redefine things, which in legal terms meant absolutely nothing. Which meant I still had every opportunity to do what I needed to do before this became something I couldn't control. The next morning, I called my attorney. His name is Victor. We've worked together for 7 years. He is the most methodical man I have ever met. and I mean that as the highest compliment I can give another human being. I need a private consultation, I told him. Not business. Personal. This week. Today, if possible. Brief silence. 2 o'clock, he said. I'll clear the afternoon. I didn't tell Claire I was meeting with Victor. She assumed I was going into the office for a late client call, which was a reasonable assumption because that happened often enough. I drove to Victor's office, sat across from his desk, and told him everything. Not emotionally, just factually. What she said, what she implied, what I believed was coming. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You want to restructure before she initiates." "I want to protect what I built," I said. "Legally, properly, without hiding anything or doing anything that could be challenged later." He nodded slowly. "Then we need to move carefully but quickly," he said. "And we need to document everything as we go." Over the next 3 weeks, Victor and I worked through a restructuring plan that was, in his words, aggressive but entirely clean. The savings account that had both our names. I approached Claire about restructuring it. I told her it was for tax optimization purposes. I told her our financial advisor had suggested we separate certain assets to reduce our combined exposure during a period of uncertainty. That was all true. I just didn't specify what kind of uncertainty I was referring to. She signed the paperwork without asking many questions. She was already mentally in Austin. My business had been structured as an LLC with a joint marital interest clause built into the original operating agreement, which was something I had done years ago on the advice of someone who told me it would help us qualify for a specific type of small business loan. That clause made a portion of the company's equity theoretically accessible in a divorce proceeding. Victor and I spent 2 weeks restructuring the operating agreement. We brought in a second party, my longtime business partner Derek, who had always been a minority stakeholder but was now formalized as a co-managing member with clearly defined interest separations. It was all legitimate. It was all documented. It was all done through proper legal channels with full transparency on paper. But it meant that what Claire might have been entitled to in a dissolution proceeding became significantly more complicated to access. I want to be clear about something. I did not forge anything. I did not hide money. I did not transfer assets to a secret account. Everything I did was visible, documented, and legally defensible. But I did it strategically. I did it with the full knowledge of what was coming. And I did it while she was still living in my house, sleeping in my bed, and telling me she loved me every morning out of what I can only describe as emotional inertia. About a month after the dinner conversation, Claire brought it up again. "Have you thought more about what I said?" We were in the kitchen, Saturday morning, the kind of gray November day that makes Portland feel like the inside of a cloud. "I've thought about almost nothing else," I said, which was true. And I poured my coffee, turned to look at her. "I think you should go to Austin," I said. She blinked. Really? You're not going to fight me on this? Would fighting change what you want?" She was quiet. "No," she admitted. "Then I'm not going to fight you." Something flickered across her face in that moment. I've tried to identify it since. It wasn't relief, exactly. It was something more unsettled. Like she had prepared for a war and found the battlefield empty. Like she had a speech ready and I had just changed the subject. "I thought you'd be more upset," she said. "I am upset," I said honestly. "But I'm also a pragmatist. And I understand that you've already made your decision. I haven't officially made any decision." "Claire." She looked at me. "You made the decision before you sat down at that dinner table," I said. The conversation was a notification, not a negotiation. She didn't argue with that, because she couldn't. What followed was 2 more months of a kind of surreal limbo. We were still married. We still shared the house. We still had dinner most nights and watched television on weekends and functioned like a household. But there was a glass wall between us now. We could see each other perfectly clearly. We just couldn't touch. In those 2 months, I finished everything I needed to finish. The business restructuring was complete. The savings separation was done. I had opened a new personal investment account in my name only and began redirecting a significant portion of my monthly income into it. The house was something we needed to address, and I approached it the same way I approached everything else, practically. I had an appraisal done. I consulted with Victor about our options, and I made Claire an offer before she could make one to me. "I'd like to buy out your half of the house," I told her one evening. She looked genuinely surprised. "You want to keep it?" "I do." "Why?" "It's a family house. We bought it thinking we'd." She stopped herself. "Thinking we'd have kids eventually," I finished for her. "Yes. I know," I said. "But it's also the house I spent 4 years customizing. The home office. The garage workshop. The landscaping. This is my space too, and I'd rather buy you out than split and sell. She considered this. What would you offer? I had a number ready. A fair number, based on the appraisal. Not generous, but not low. Fair. She thought about it for almost a week. And then she accepted. By February, we had begun the formal separation process. Claire had been clear that she wanted a divorce, not just a separation. I didn't object. Victor handled everything. The process was, in his words, remarkably clean, largely because I had spent 3 months making sure it would be. Claire had hired her own attorney, a woman named Karen who was known for being aggressive in asset division cases. Karen pushed hard on several fronts. The business equity was the main battleground. She argued that the restructuring of the LLC had been done in bad faith specifically to reduce Claire's marital claim. Victor pointed to the documentation, the timing, the business rationale, and the fact that Claire had signed off on the savings restructuring herself. Karen had no real counter to any of it. The case settled without going to trial. The divorce was finalized in April. Claire got a fair settlement, less than she might have expected if she'd moved faster, or if I'd been less prepared. But fair. She got a portion of the joint savings that remained. She got the buyout on the house. She got a car. She got what was genuinely hers. And I retained full ownership of my business, my restructured investments, and the house. She moved to Austin in May. I helped her load the truck. I know how that sounds. But we had been together for 9 years, and whatever had broken between us, she wasn't a bad person. She was someone who wanted something I couldn't give her, or maybe something she couldn't name, and she had handled it in a way that told me more about where her head had been for years than any conversation ever could. But she wasn't cruel, and I didn't want to be either. She hugged me at the door of the truck, long and tight. The kind of hug that is an apology for everything that was never said directly. I hope you find what you're looking for, I told her. She pulled back and looked at me with something complicated in her eyes. You're not angry? I said. I'm not anymore. How? I thought about it honestly. Because anger is expensive, I said. And I decided early on that I wasn't going to pay that price. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded, got in the truck, and drove away. The next several months were quiet. Good quiet mostly. The kind of quiet you don't fully appreciate until you've spent years around someone else's emotional weather. I worked. I ran in the mornings. I rebuilt some parts of the house that I'd always wanted to change, but had compromised on for the sake of household peace. I had dinner with Derek and his wife occasionally. I dated a little, cautiously, without urgency. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just living. Around October, about 5 months after she left, I got a message from a mutual friend named Greg. Greg had known us both since before we were married. He was tactful about it, which I appreciated. Hey, the message said. Don't want to intrude. Just wanted to give you a heads up because I think you deserve to know. The Austin opportunity didn't really materialize the way Claire expected. The partnership with Derek's sister's firm fell through. Something about funding issues and a disagreement between the partners. She's doing freelance work. Seems like she's okay, but it's not what she went there for. I read the message twice. Didn't respond right away. Went for a run. Came home. Made coffee. Sat down and wrote back. Thanks for letting me know. Hope she's doing all right. And that was it. I didn't feel vindicated. Or maybe I felt something in that direction and chose not to sit in it. Because that kind of satisfaction tends to curdle if you let it stay too long. I went back to my life. Booked a consulting contract with a new client in Seattle that had been in the pipeline for months. Took a solo trip to the Oregon coast that I had been meaning to take for years. Renovated the home office properly. Got a dog. His name is Biscuit. He is large and uncoordinated and has no respect for personal space, and he is excellent company. It was December when she called. 11 months after that Tuesday dinner. 7 months after the divorce was finalized. 5 months after the truck pulled away. I was in the kitchen making dinner when my phone lit up with her name. I stared at it for a moment. Then I answered. Hey, she said. Her voice was different. Not broken exactly, but lower. More careful. Like someone walking in heels on wet pavement. Hey, I said. I'm sorry to call out of nowhere. It's fine. Brief silence. How are you? She asked. I'm well, I said. Business is good. I'm good. Good. Another silence. How are you doing? I asked. Not with edge. Just the honest question. She was quiet for a moment. It's been a harder year than I expected, she finally said. I'm sorry to hear that. The partnership with Natalie's firm didn't work out. I heard something like that. You heard? Through Greg. Oh, she processed that. Yeah, it fell apart pretty quickly after I got here. Funding issues. Some internal disagreements I wasn't really privy to. I'm sorry. I've been doing freelance work. Wellness consulting. It's going okay, but it's inconsistent. Freelance usually is in the beginning. Yeah. A pause. Yeah. I waited. I had a pretty clear sense of where this was heading. I'd had it since the first 2 seconds of the call, but I wasn't going to assume. I was going to let her say whatever she had called to say. I've been thinking about some things, she said eventually. About decisions I made. About what I thought I wanted versus what I actually had. Okay. I said stability felt restrictive. You did. I think I was wrong about that. I didn't say anything. Or, not wrong about what I felt, she clarified quickly, but wrong about what stability actually meant. I think I confused stability with stagnation, and those aren't the same thing. That was a perceptive observation. I would have agreed with it eagerly if she had said it 2 years ago. That's a meaningful distinction, I said neutrally. I've had a lot of time to think, she said. Small exhale. Too much time, probably. What are you thinking about, specifically? I asked, because I needed her to say it. Not because I was being difficult, but because vague conversations with high emotional stakes are how people end up in misunderstandings that take another year to untangle. I'm thinking about whether we made the right call, she said. The divorce. Whether it was the right call. Whether we moved too fast. I set down the spoon I'd been holding, leaned against the counter. Claire, I know, she said. I know it's done. I know legally everything is settled. I'm not asking you to just undo everything. I'm just saying that I miss what we had, and I think I understand now what I gave up. I thought about that Tuesday dinner. The prepared calm on her face. The rehearsed words. The redefined things. I thought about the 3 weeks I spent in Victor's office making sure I wasn't destroyed by someone else's decision. I thought about driving her to the truck with boxes of her things. I thought about the months of quiet that had slowly started to feel like actual peace rather than just absence. I hear you, I said, and I appreciate that you're being honest about how you feel. But I need to be honest with you too. She waited. When you said stability felt restrictive, I said slowly, I didn't argue with you. Not because I agreed, but because I understood that you had already decided, and arguing with a decision that's already been made is just theater. I know, she said quietly. And when you left, I continued, I didn't fall apart. I didn't beg. I didn't chase. I did what I've always done, which is figure out how to protect what I built and keep moving. I know, she said again. Her voice was smaller now. What are you asking me for, Claire? I said, not harshly, just clearly. I don't know exactly, she admitted. I think I'm asking whether there's any path back. To what? To us. I took a breath. There isn't a shared financial structure anymore, I said. There isn't a house with both our names on it. There isn't a savings account that belongs to both of us. I know. The things that were shared are now separated. Legally. Permanently. I know that. So when you say us, I said, you mean starting over from scratch. As 2 separate people with separate everything. Brief silence. Yes, she said. I suppose that's what I mean. Here's the part that I think people expect to go one of 2 ways. Either I take her back, swept up by the emotion of it, undone by the history of 9 years and the sound of her voice being smaller than it used to be, or I slam a door. I say something cutting and final, and she cries, and it becomes a clear moral victory for the narrator. Neither of those things happened. I don't think that's something I can do right now, I said. Right now, she echoed. That's not a door opening, I said. I want to be clear about that. I'm not saying not yet, keep trying. I'm saying that I've spent this year rebuilding something, and it's going well, and I'm not interested in dismantling it emotionally on the possibility that something might work differently this time. She was quiet for a long moment. That's fair, she said, and I believe she meant it. Can I ask you something? She said. Go ahead. Were you angry? When I left? Yes. But you didn't show it. No. Why not? I thought about how to answer that honestly without it becoming a lecture. Because she deserved an honest answer, not a performance. Because the moment I understood what was actually happening, I said, my energy went into managing the situation, not feeling the situation. That's just how I'm built. That must have been lonely, she said. That caught me off guard. I paused. It was a little, I admitted. But the alternative was worse. I kept waiting for you to fight, she said. I know. I kept thinking you'd come after me. Say something that would either change my mind or, I don't know, give me a reason to stay. Would it have worked? I asked. A long pause. Probably not, she said. Then I made the right call. Another silence. Not uncomfortable, exactly. Just heavy with everything that had already been decided. "How's Biscuit?" she said suddenly. That surprised a laugh out of me. A real one. "How do you know about Biscuit?" "Derek mentioned it." "To Natalie." "Who mentioned it to me?" "Of course." "How is he?" "Enormous," I said. "Uncoordinated. Very committed to sitting on my feet when I'm trying to work." She laughed. Quiet and real. The laugh I had fallen in love with 11 years ago. "I'm glad you got a dog," she said softly. "Me too. I'm glad you're okay." "I am," I said. "I really am." Another brief silence. "Take care of yourself, Claire." "You too," she said. And then, after a moment, "I'm sorry for how I handled things. The timing and the way I said it. I think I owed you more than I gave you." I sat with that for a second. The apology I had never asked for. The one that came 7 months after it would have mattered most. "I appreciate that," I said. "I do. But you don't forgive me," she said. Not accusatory. Just reading it accurately. "I don't hold on to things the way some people do," I said honestly. "But forgiveness and readiness to go back are two different things." "Yeah," she said quietly. "Yeah, I understand that." We said goodbye. I hung up, stood in the kitchen for a moment. Biscuit ambled in from the living room and sat on my feet. I reached down and scratched behind his ears. There's a version of this story where that phone call changes everything. Where I hear the smallness in her voice and something in me softens and gives way and decides that whatever it took to rebuild is worth it. There's a version where I call Victor the next morning and start asking questions about what a reconciliation would look like on paper. I understand that version. I've thought about it. I've sat with it honestly. But here's the thing about building something real, whether it's a business or a financial structure or a version of your life that actually fits who you are. You don't dismantle it for the sake of nostalgia. You don't undo 12 months of careful, painful, deliberate reconstruction because someone misses what they walked away from. That's not coldness. That's just what it means to have learned something. Derek asked me about it in January over lunch. "She called," he said. It wasn't a question. She did. Natalie mentioned she'd been struggling. She seemed like she was managing. "Are you?" "No," I said simply. He nodded. No follow-up questions. That's why Derek is one of the few people I actually trust. "She's a good person," he said after a moment. "She is," I agreed. "She just wanted something she couldn't name. And when she found out it wasn't what she thought, she looked back at what she'd had." That's very human. It is. Doesn't mean it's reversible. "No," I said. "It doesn't." I want to talk about the restructuring for a moment. Because I've told parts of this story to a few people, and the reaction I get most often is something like, "Weren't you afraid she'd find out what you were doing?" And the answer is, there was nothing to find out. I restructured my business through proper legal channels. I separated the savings with her signature on the paperwork. I made every move in full daylight. The only thing I didn't announce was the reason I was doing it. And a reason is not a secret. A reason is just information I chose to keep private. People sometimes frame what I did as manipulative. I've thought about that seriously because I don't think of myself as someone who operates that way. But here's my honest take. She had been planning her exit, or at least seriously considering it, for months before that Tuesday dinner. The polished presentation of it, the prepared calm, the terminology she used, redefine things, explore bigger opportunities, structure that doesn't allow for risk. That wasn't spontaneous language. She had thought through what she wanted. She had made her plans. She had prepared her argument. I did the same thing. I just did it after she made hers, and I did it quietly. If that makes me calculated, then yes. I'm calculated. I've been calculated my entire adult life. It's how I built a business from $40,000 and a used laptop into something that employs 18 people and clears 7 figures in annual revenue. Calculation isn't the opposite of feeling. It's just what you do with feeling when falling apart isn't an option. There's one more part of this that I haven't talked about yet. The part I've only told Victor directly. 3 weeks before she made that dinner speech, she had met with a financial advisor on her own. I didn't find this out until we were in the settlement process. And even then it came out not as some dramatic revelation, but just as a routine disclosure item. She had met with a financial advisor and asked questions about, in the document's language, asset division in the event of a marital dissolution. 3 weeks before the dinner, she had already been getting her information. She had already been understanding the landscape. I didn't bring this up during the settlement. Victor noted it, but advised against weaponizing it, since it would only complicate and extend proceedings that were going cleanly. He was right, but I think about it sometimes. Not with bitterness, just as information. The dinner was not the beginning of her decision. The dinner was where she decided I was ready to be told. That's an important distinction, because it means that she gave me less time than she appeared to. And it means that the 3 months I spent preparing weren't rushed or reactive. They were, if anything, barely enough. Victor made an observation once, near the end of the process. We were reviewing the final settlement papers, and he made a comment that I've turned over in my head a few times since. Most people, he said, come to me after the damage is done, after they've already argued, or signed something they shouldn't have, or made decisions from emotion rather than strategy. You came to me before. That made all the difference. I asked him if he thought what I did was fair. He looked at me over his glasses for a moment. I think you protected yourself lawfully and thoroughly, he said. The question of fairness is above my pay grade. I respected that answer. I've thought about it myself. Was it fair? She would probably say no. Karen, her attorney, definitely said no, though her job was to say exactly that. But I keep coming back to the same point. She made a plan. I made a plan. Hers involved leaving. Mine involved not being destroyed by her leaving. If hers was fair, then so was mine. It's March now. Almost 16 months since that Tuesday dinner. The business had its best quarter in 5 years. I signed 2 new major contracts in February. Derek and I are talking about an expansion into supply chain optimization software that could be genuinely significant. The house looks the way I always wanted it to. I run 4 days a week. I sleep well. I heard through Greg, indirectly, that Claire had stabilized in Austin. She's doing freelance wellness coaching, mostly remote clients. It sounds like it's growing slowly. She's apparently in a relationship, someone she met through the wellness community. I don't know much beyond that, and I don't need to. I think about that dinner sometimes. The glass of Merlot, the rehearsed calm, the word suffocating. I think about what I would do differently, and I genuinely don't have a clear answer. Not because I did everything perfectly, but because the things I might have done differently were things I'd already tried. More conversation, more presence, more asking what she actually needed. I had done those things. They hadn't moved the needle. What I've come to understand, slowly and imperfectly, is that some people need to leave before they understand what staying was worth. And some of those people come back, and some don't, and some do, and then leave again. And the question of whether you open the door when they knock isn't really about them at all. It's about what you've built in their absence. It's about whether what you have now is better or worse than what you had before. And it's about whether the risk of undoing it is worth taking. For me, right now, the answer is no. Not out of spite, not out of punishment, not even out of lack of feeling, just out of a clear-eyed assessment of where I am versus where I was. Where I am is better, and protecting that matters more than revisiting what's already been settled. I went back to that legal pad once, the one from the first night, the 2 columns, what I could lose, what I could protect. I looked at the right column, the one with just the one word, time. I was right about that. Time was the most valuable thing I had. Time to understand the situation before reacting to it. Time to prepare before things moved into formal territory. Time to make decisions from clarity rather than panic. Time to build something new instead of just grieving something old. That's the whole story. There's no dramatic final scene, no confrontation, no verdict from the universe about who was right and who was wrong. Just a man who built something, protected it when it was threatened, and kept going. Biscuit is currently asleep on the couch, which he knows he's not allowed on. He has calculated, correctly, that I'm in a good enough mood tonight to let it go. He's smart, more self-aware than I give him credit for. He has a good life. So do I. I didn't know that was possible when she set that glass of Merlot on the table. But here we are,